Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the eighth webinar of local and regional governments towards COP25 in Chile, prepared and moderated by ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability in its capacity as the focal point of local governments and the municipal authorities constituency to the UNFCCC. My name is Yunus Arikan. I will try to both moderate and present some of the slides of this webinar today. In our webinar today, our agenda consists of three main chapters. Before going on to the content, I'd like to remind you that all participants of this webinar are by default muted, and during the course of the webinar you can write your questions in the question box, and you can also share any point at the question box or chat box as well. We will try to have a Q&A session at the end of the first half an hour or so that during this Q&A session we would also try to mute you, so that if you raise your hand we can see you and we can unmute you so that you can also speak and share your points as well. But we encourage you to keep your hands or keep your speaking notes or interventions until the end of the webinar in order to ensure consistency. In today's webinar, I'm delighted that I will be joining with my colleagues, Marshall Cohen, the Chief of Staff from the Global Covenant of Mayors and Energy, as well as the colleagues from Executive Office of the UN Secretary General, Hamza Tiber and Sophie Obert. Due to time limitations, our colleagues based in New York will only be able to join you to the session, the webinar in the afternoon. But we are, as you may have received information from the previous webinar, this webinar is recorded and uploaded on the website afterwards, so that any interaction with them, you can also listen once their session is over and uploaded on the web, and we will be circulating you the links as well, together with the links to the PowerPoint. I know my colleague Marshall will be joining both of these webinars, but I heard he's having technical difficulties, and in the agenda, as you have seen, UN Climate Action Summit is somewhere in the middle of this webinar. So I suggest we start this first part of the webinar in order to save time, and when Marshall joins us, we can continue with his interventions as well. As I said, we will have a background of our 2019 agenda and updates, especially since 3rd of July, the last webinar of the LGMA. We will spend some time in UN Climate Action Summit, and we will go through the key milestones on the way to COP, and as well as expected agenda in Chile. Recalling our year-round engagement, those who are familiar with the climate negotiations, there is a cyclic process that the host of the COP, the host of the Conference of Parties in the previous year, takes the leadership throughout the year as the president, and the incoming host also acts as the political leader, and they're prepared to take over when the conference starts in their country, and their role continues 1 year ahead. In between, there is a mid-year term, mid-year sessions in Bonn. This is fixed every year. It's in Bonn in May or June. And in this 2018 and 19 period, we have this leadership as the Poland as the COP24 president, as the host in Katowice, and Chile is the incoming presidency. The Minister of Environment of Chile is the incoming or president designate of the COP25, whereas State Secretary of Minister of Energy, Michał Kurtyka, is the COP24 president from Poland. Since Paris Agreement, with this innovative model of high-level climate champions, we have additional leaders who support the action agenda. In this year, this is led by Tomasz Khrushchev from Poland and Gonzalo Munoz from Chile. Last year in 2018 was the flagship process, was the Tallinn Dialogues. After the recognition of the Paris Agreement, Tallinn Dialogues was the opportunity for local and regional governments to engage in the climate policy planning and implementation at the national level, and that was a huge opportunity. During the negotiations in 2017, we as the LGMA have pushed forward the idea that we should be opening these dialogues to every city and country in the region, and we have demonstrated our engagement through 60 events in 40 countries, and the impressive mobilization was really a proof that the Tallinn Dialogues is an opportunity for making NDCs fit for Paris Agreement by bringing sustainable urban development and climate action, as well as engaging all levels of government. Just meanwhile, I'm informed Marshall has joined us, so he will be contributing in today's webinar. So I'm very happy that he's able to join us today. So we are all set in today's webinar. So let me continue without further delays. Again, those familiar with the climate negotiations, you may be aware that there is a broad agenda of negotiations. There are some topics which has a decision back to 5 or 10 years ago. Therefore, there is a regular every years of cyclic engagement, and there are priorities of each year. In terms of our engagement as local and regional governments, we have three main purposes in engaging in the climate process. One, to showcase our achievements, which is done through either summits or events or platforms like CDP ICLEI, where our climate information data commitments are visible and that aggregated and presented to the national or global community. We participate in the consultations throughout the year and in the COPs, both through workshops and the new mechanism of Marrakesh Partnership. And we also contribute in decision making. Of course, our positions are delivered by constituents to the representatives, either by verbally or by written form according to the agenda. But we are also engaging with the Friends of Cities, which is now evolving into Friends of Multi-Level Action since 2019 this year as well. This year, particular emphasis is that there was a decision in Katowice that nations are encouraged to enhance their NDCs by their experience from the Tallinn Dialogues. This is a valuable opportunity. So now the Tallinn Dialogues, mobilization of the Tallinn Dialogues now have an official mandate for local and regional governments to be engaged in the NDC planning, both the current ones and the ones that are expected to be submitted in 2020. This year, we will focus on local climate finance and cities. There will be a spatial forum, and we will go through this later on. And we will continue to raise ambition, both with our engagement in the Climate Action Summit, but also from bottom-up initiatives, climate neutrality, but as well as climate emergency declarations as well. For this year, presidency has originally defined 7 themes, but after the negotiations or sessions in June in Bonn, we have now observed the presidency has raised the number of topics to 9, and they have particularly highlighted cities as one of the 9 priority topics, which is increasing our of course expectation, but also workload, but also outcomes as well. So that is a very encouraging news, and that shows the value of being engaged in the process is taken up by the presidencies, and they revise their strategies. We have a year-round mobilization. We have our own events like summits of our networks or partners like UCLG and C40, the global ones, but also Urban 20 and other events like ICA, as well as regional events like Africa Climate Solutions or Seoul Mayors Forum or US Conference of Mayors. We are following UN Climate Convention mandated events, both in Bonn, but also in the regional level, and also technical ones. But there's also other UN forums like UN Environment Assembly, UN Habitat Assembly, or high-level political forums, which is not the mandate of UN Climate Summit Convention, but interactions in these summits definitely feed into the outcomes or the vice versa, so that climate outcomes or climate process can shape other fora as well. This year was particular of the European Parliament elections, which was very positive in the sense that there was an increasing positioning of citizens for more active engagement in the climate. That was a very promising signal. We have felt this all throughout the year through the Fridays for Future, and in that sense, in this year, there has now been preparations that on the 20th of September, the Friday before the climate summit, there will be a global climate track where all citizens are encouraged to join, and we look forward to leadership of local and regional governments as well. Next year, we will have milestones such as the biodiversity COP in China in October, as well as conclusion of this first round of Paris Agreement, where at the COP in Europe, rumors are that it could be in the UK or in Glasgow, there may be or there would be new NDCs, so that there will be more ambitious outcomes. The June session, we will not go through it, but there was a numerous mobilization. There were numerous workshops that we have attended, side events, and among them, the most important was the Spatial joint event of COP24 presidency and ICLEI in its capacity as the LGMA focal point. This was remarkable for a number of reasons, where we were for the first time a follow-up of the presidency agenda. It was one of the 3 events of the presidency, but it was the only one organized in collaboration, in equal partnership, a constituency. There were more than 50 subnationals, including mayors and city and regional leaders. There were also other stakeholders like indigenous people or SLOCAT representatives, or German Watch in the breakout groups as well. There was also remarkable collaboration with the UNFCCC Secretariat, with multiple teams, from the executive director to the communications and Marrakesh Partnership, Nairobi Work Program, and the COOL, which is the body which mobilizes our engagement. We also have engaged with different partners, different parties. They have always been very active, supportive of the cities and multi-level agenda, be EU, Mexico, Senegal, Germany, among those who have been flagshipping, and as well as Morocco as well. So we are now heading towards with the outcome of this. There was also very promising responses from the incoming COP25 presidents as well. In the last couple of weeks, we have witnessed that the cities IPCC, the research agenda, has now almost, as we can easily say, it's concluded. The proceedings are released. There was a poster presentation in the UNFCCC, which means for the first time cities are officially in the UNFCCC agenda as well, in the research dialogue. And the organizing committee also made a 16-page summary of the whole cities action agenda. Throughout the last couple of weeks, last month in July, there was an important high-level political forum which is tracking the SDGs annually in New York with the representatives in the United Nations headquarters. The Global Task Force, moderated by, or secretariat served by the UCLG, is voicing the inputs of local and regional governments. And because of the SDG 13 agenda as one of the SDGs that is covered, there's a special chapter on climate action and cities, secretariat or drafted by C40 with inputs from UCLG, ICLEI, and Regions 4 as the partners involved in this process. So you can have a full chapter inside this document. We're now going to the Climate Action Summit. Maybe it's time for me to give the floor to our colleague Marshall Cohen, Chief of Staff from the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, so that he can take us through both the preparations, the expected initiatives, the expected events, and activities of the networks in the process. Marshall, I can keep the screen, and you can unmute yourself, and we can start listening to you if it's okay for you.
That's perfect. Thank you, Eunice, and apologies for the delay connecting. But great to join this group and give an overview of the summit, of where we're at. I know we provided an update at the very beginning on how it was shaping up, and then there was an opportunity where the UNSG's office joined one of the previous webinars. So glad to be here today to provide an update. So as the overall summit planning goes, as you'll see from the chart on the screen now, it's still focused in the 9 different action areas and tracks, with cities and local governments being featured in the infrastructure cities and local action track, which is being co-led by Kenya and Turkey at the member state level and with UN Habitat at the institutional level. And then from there, there's 5 sub-tracks within the ECLA track on decentralized finance, transport, building, subnational mobilization, and resilience for the urban poor. And then we can go into the specific subtracks where there is initiatives that are coming out and expected to be announced at the summit. On finance, with the lead from Germany, is the Leadership for Urban Climate Investments, LUCI. This is the initiative that, for those of you that have heard about the city's climate finance gap fund, is included. But this is a way that the initiative is brought together with other both new initiatives like the CCFLA, the city's climate leadership finance assembly, as well as existing initiatives that connect all of the different pieces in the subnational finance planning process and investment process to be brought. For the subnational mobilization, we are working on a toolkit for climate emergencies, as well as some other priorities that we'll get to once we talk about the events and some of the broader kind of narrative-based activities for subnationals and around the summit. But on the climate emergencies itself, this was a request that came from the GCOM board and also from a lot of the city network partners that in a lead up to the summit, there's obviously been hundreds of cities across the world, but mostly in the global north that are declaring climate emergencies, and there's a growing interest from cities of all sizes, and especially cities in the global south, to also declare climate emergencies, but across different regions and different cultures, it's not always clear what that means or the process that that would take. So we are working with the different network partners and also with some of our example board cities like Seoul and Paris to look at kind of what situations exist and what examples can be used. On buildings, there's a zero carbon buildings initiative. On transport, again, a initiative around freight. And on resilience, there's an initiative on identifying hotspot cities to provide a platform to provide support for building urban resilience for the urban poor. We are expecting to receive 2-pagers on each of the initiatives that are coming out of the ECLEI within the coming day. And I think we will be able to share those with the greater group of stakeholders so that both you and at the organizational level, but also directly to cities and local governments can have an understanding of what these initiatives really mean, and also where there are opportunities for cities to make commitments to these initiatives, but also where resources can be made available to help cities through these new initiatives. And then lastly, there is the flagship report from the Coalition of Urban Transitions. As you may know, this is the coalition of 50+ organizations, and this report is being financed and sponsored by the UK, Sweden, Germany, and the Global Covenant. And it's really trying to set the narrative for cities and local governments and for the perspective for the summit, showcasing where there is the full opportunity for cities to be involved in climate action, but also just in future urban planning and how that can be a benefit to national governments. And it will come out with specific recommendations to national governments on specific actions that they can take to support cities. Across the other tracks, there are several other initiatives that are coming out. From the social and political drivers, there is a health initiative that is linked to air quality that is being led by Spain and the World Health Organization. We are looking at different ways for the city network community to partner with the WHO and with their existing campaigns like the Every Breath Matters campaign to see how we can create a better connection between cities with climate change and health, which is a key priority for them. So not quite sure what will be announced at the summit at this point, but looking at opportunities for there. And then there are also initiatives in mitigation and energy that I'm not super familiar with at a high level, but if Eunice has any comments on those, definitely feel free to jump in. Moving to the schedule for the summit itself, we are pleased to have a good opportunity to place many subnational actors in a series of events happening the weekend before. As the kind of summit has been laid out, the summit itself being on Monday the 23rd, they're using the weekend before as an opportunity to really showcase all of the work that's been done in each of the 9 tracks, since there have been so many different sub-tracks and so many initiatives that have been developed over the past year for the summit, but only the most, as they say, quote-unquote, summitable announcements will be made on the Monday. And there's still been great progress and new partnerships and collaboration between member states and different organizations in the lead up to the summit. So much of that will be announced on the weekend before, and also be an opportunity to really help set the narrative and give a framing for what will be featured and announced at the summit on Monday. So starting on Saturday the 21st in the morning, hosted by UCCRN, there'll be the launch of a new report on science for 1.5 degree cities. This is an opportunity that I know ICLEI has been involved with, but the SG's office has just let us know that for this launch event, they are interested in having mayors or city officials participate in that. So that is one opportunity. And then in the afternoon, there is going to be specific programming on subnational mobilization. We've now combined several events so that it's just a full afternoon of programming from 3 to 6 p.m. And within that window, there will be an event that is a panel between mayors and ministers that we really want to feature existing commitments to date. So showcasing all of the progress and commitments that cities and local governments have made in climate action to date. Part of what has been challenging in the development of the summit and getting to a point of understanding why it might not make sense for cities to be making new commitments this September, because they've already been making so many commitments over the past years, including at the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco last September. We finally have this opportunity to really help set the stage at the beginning of the weekend by showcasing all of the progress and impact of subnationals at this point, and then also use that opportunity to show where there are gaps and where there is a need to fill more resources and have new resources mobilized by mostly member states, but also where other stakeholders can come in. There will also be a panel specific on nature-based solutions in cities, where they'll be tying it to one of the tree campaigns that is being launched at the summit, as well as speaking on how nature-based solutions are a solution for resilience and mitigation and adaptation at the summit. Moving into, and then the final panel will be on decentralized finance, again, speaking to the City Climate Finance Gap Fund and other subnational solutions that are available in finance. On Sunday, it's the official integrated EcoTrack programming from 10 to 1 p.m. This is a series of different panels that are being organized by the SG's office that will really aim to highlight all of the new initiatives that are coming out of the EcoTrack and that will be announced on Monday. Again, this will be multi-level panels that will include national government representatives, subnational actors, as well as stakeholder organizations. And then following that event, there will be the official launch of the CUT report, which I just described. For each of the events that I've previously mentioned, there is an interest to include mayors and local government officials in that programming. GCOM is working to organize the delegation of mayors and city officials that will be in New York. And it's kind of our understanding at the moment that the majority of cities are arriving on Sunday or Sunday afternoon. So we are definitely looking for recommendations for speakers who would be available Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon, as well as on Sunday, to participate in these events, since the UN has really been making an accessible platform for subnational actors. On the 23rd, there's the summit itself. We are still waiting for a program and understanding of how that will shape up to be, but it's our understanding at this point that it will be broken up by different panels from the various tracks from the summit, from the 9 action portfolios, and then those will be broken up by individual major country announcements by member states on new commitments. We are expecting to have an updated program on that, hopefully later this week, and can share more information on that. In the afternoon of the 23rd, New York City is hosting an event at Columbia University, and more details are forthcoming on that. On the 24th, that begins the SDG Summit through the High Level Political Forum. There's associated programming with the SDG Summit within different parts of the UN that are being led by the Global Task Force. And those events that have been submitted are still pending review, but we will include information on that in future updates. On the 25th, the SDG Summit continues, and there will be a localizing roundtable. That's the day also of the Bloomberg Global Business Forum, as well as a finance side event that is being shaped up by many of the partners that are involved in the subnational finance track of the ICLEI track. And then on Thursday, the 26th, there is the high-level dialogue on financing for development. This is a finance summit. It's the first dialogue of this type that is being co-hosted by Canada and Ghana, and is another opportunity that we see for potential announcements around finance, that we're still developing how cities and local governments can be a greater part of that. This is just a little bit more of a zoom in on the different events on Saturday and Sunday, again, where there are really a great opportunity to include subnational voices. But as this will be circulated after, I think we can skip ahead to the next slide. And then finally, in the build-up to all of this, we've been very grateful to have so many different partners from the GCOM Alliance engaged in the development of the various initiatives, as well as the planning for the summit, and now specifically on the events that I just discussed. In advance of the summit, last week, the GCOM organized a letter to Special Envoy de Alba, the UN Special Envoy for this summit, endorsed by the partners that you see on the screen, that really outlined where all of our priorities for September are. And those really include, as I've previously mentioned, recognizing commitments to date, where there's an opportunity for member states to recognize and consider locally determined contributions, a platform for cities and local governments that we're now very grateful to have this opportunity on Saturday and Sunday, as well as probably 1 or 2 speaking slots on the summit itself for cities and local governments to be represented, as where that previously was unsure. I'm really championing the recommendations of the Coalition for Urban Transitions report that will be released on September 17th ahead of the summit. The specific championing for the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, as we see it as really a new type of fund that can really help cities accelerate in their climate action by giving them the early assistance to support project preparation, so that projects that are currently trapped in plans can move on and be invested in. And then finally, the piece on air quality that we are working with the city network partners at the global level, as well as the WHO and CCAC, to develop a way to have this be a greater part of the experience for cities and how they are working on climate.
Yeah, Marshall, thanks a lot for this comprehensive presentation of all the mobilization and expectations around the climate summit, UN Climate Action Summit. Um, it was really, I believe, helpful for all our friends and colleagues attending this call. I suggest there are several questions. Maybe we can immediately go on to this Q&A session for the summit here without necessarily waiting for the end of the webinar. That may be much more fruitful. The questions were raised by Truong from GIZ. He is he or she. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the name, but he's asking about the Lucy, the new established fund for city actions. By the time he was raising this question, actually, you were mentioning about the fund as a separate entity, but he was asking whether we can have more information about this fund and maybe Lucy. That may be a confusion. This is one question. Then there's another one from Sarah Kupka, our colleague from the Regions 4. How can local and especially regional governments join the different initiatives or the events on the weekend before? That's the question from Sarah. And Sarah and Trang, if you wish to raise any points verbally, feel free to raise your hand so that we can turn on and unmute you so that you can speak as well. But Marshall, would you like to respond to these two questions as a starting point?
Sure. So on to Trung's question on Lucy and the Gap Fund, the final narrative on Lucy is still just being finalized. It's continuing to change day to day, and there's a group of stakeholders in Berlin yesterday and today working to finalize that. That will all be boiled down into a two-pager, like all of the other initiatives within the ICLEI track that we will be able to share. And then, as I mentioned, the Gap Fund is a specific piece of Lucy, but not the only new announcement that will be made. And there is a current public three-pager on that I will be happy to share with Eunice that he can share with you following this call. And then to Sarah's question, there's a definite opportunity for cities, local governments, and regions to engage in the various initiatives. Each of them are at kind of a different level, and that's something that we are working with UN Habitat to better understand, because some have already pre-selected cities that they are working with, others there will be an open call, others just aren't developed quite yet to receive applications or have a call open for cities, but they're in development and would like us to start thinking about where those all lie. That information will be available in the two pagers that are being developed, and as I said, are hopefully going to be ready later this week, and I will share with Eunice when those are ready so that they can be disseminated to this group as well. For the events itself, GCOM is leading the coordination of the delegation of subnational actors as our role leading the subnational mobilization track with Mexico and Canada. So I would just welcome Eunice to share my contact information following this. And for anyone on this group who's not a part of our regular coordination calls that would like to be, we can add you as well as share where there are specific opportunities where you might be able to help slate in different officials and leaders from your respective constituencies.
Excellent. Excellent, and I think I hope this was responding. I already received the feedback from Trang that she is happy with your responses, and she's waiting for additional updates, as you mentioned in your call, in your responses. I think I don't see new questions now, especially for this part of the call or the webinar. There's still a couple of slides. It will go through the next pathway towards COP, and there's still opportunity. I'm not sure, Marshall, how long you will be able to join us, but any our partner or colleague who are in the call, if they have additional questions, they can still share this during the chat box, sorry, on the question box, or in the Q&A session in the end of the day. And I will now continue. And once again, we thank Marshall, not just for today's presentation, but throughout the year in his capacity as the GCOM coordinator of the the local and regional governments and the partners in the process, which was definitely a challenge. He went through it very successfully, and we thank him for his efforts, and both him personally, but also the whole GCOM Secretariat for this collaboration. So let's continue. Yes, climate summit is important, but we also know it is not a negotiation. It is, of course, will give impetus, but there are still negotiation process in several forums. Therefore, before and after the summit is still important. On that front, maybe you may be informed that regional climate weeks becoming a very interesting agenda for our climate community. This is an opportunity for stakeholders in different parts of the world, not necessarily wait for the COP, which is already costly in different part of the world, but follow up and make more customized, localized, and more, let's say, hands on the ground discussions with the implementation of the decisions and initiatives. This week, the week that we are now in, there's already the climate week in Salvador, Brazil, prepared for Latin America and the Caribbean region. The previous one was in Ghana in March, and now this is the second one, and the third one will be at the beginning of September in Asia Pacific in Bangkok. Salvador Climate Week is particularly unique for a number of reasons. First of all, this is the first time where a city co-hosts the event. Plus, in addition to being a political co-host, the city of San Salvador officially is hosting the event at the City Hall, Town Hall of Salvador, which is again a unique experience and showing the value of engaging local and regional governments, any event at the national level with their power as a public institution, an elected body, or using the public resources, and opening the doors to the citizens in the most effective and efficient way. There will be, during the 5 days, there will be numerous events, but there will be a special, and there's already happened yesterday that happened, a special dialogue on national development contributions, which was presumably be, or which was originally designed as a closed meeting among the national governments and the UN community. But here in Salvador, for the first time, it is opened for subnational governments at all levels. From the region, there were numerous cities represented, and regions, states, prefectures participating at the different levels, be it Secretary of Environment, be it Mayor, or be it Governor. This was, we hope, would be received as a positive feedback from the negotiators and the national governments, trying to prove that local and regional governments are their best partners when it comes to designing and implementation of the NDCs. Therefore, we hope the outcome of this event will provide positive inputs to the upcoming climate summit, but also to the UN negotiations. ICLEI, the Infrastructure, Cities and Local Action, which is the terminology used in the climate summit, has special tracks again in this regional climate week as well. That was also very interesting, because there was a perception that it may not be possible that every regional week may have a priority focus on cities, but what we see now in both Accra, in Salvador, in Bangkok, all of them have an agenda on ICLEI, or cities and local action, which is again proving the value and importance of our engagement and the mobilization into these discussions. There are numerous side events, technical meetings, workshops, trainings by ICLEI partners, or the LGMA constituency, and the numerous partners in the region. Again, as a demonstration of the value of having a leadership of a local government in the process, there will be the first mayor's panel at the UNFCCC Regional Climate Week, again in Salvador. This will happen on Friday, which all shows the leadership of the Brazilian subnational governments across the country, but also across the region. So we congratulate, we commend the city of Salvador, of course, the government of Brazil, finally agreeing to host this event as well in Brazil. Those who may be familiar, there was back and forth. So we all believe this will produce valuable outcomes. Throughout the next couple of weeks, we are seeing increasing connections between land, climate, and nature. A couple of weeks ago, the IPCC, the scientific body of climate change, has released the climate change on land report. It has sections on urban expansion, urban sprawl, urbanization, not in very much details, but it is addressed as an important driver or also an opportunity for a transformative management of the land in a more holistic manner and build on the sustainable and territorial urban development as well. On the desertification side, every 2 years, the Convention on the Desertification is convening its climate conference of parties. This year, it's taking it in India in the beginning of September, and on the 7th of September, there will be the first local and regional governments day, which will particularly focus on urban-rural continuity and collaboration between cities, regions at the spatial planning, but also better resource planning, including agriculture, forestry, and also landscape planning for urban expansions. And finally, the UN Convention on Biodiversity, CBD, is kicking off its official negotiations for the post-2020 biodiversity framework. In that regard, the first negotiations will start in Nairobi next week, and this will continue until 2020. And cities and subnational governments at all levels have been participating, especially since 2008, and we have seen Convention on Biodiversity as one of the most advanced multilateral fora to open mechanisms or opportunities for engagement of local and regional governments or subnational governments in its entirety. Therefore, we will continue to act actively. There will be numerous initiatives. Cities with Nature is recognized as reporting platform, and more updates will be coming soon. Once we have more clarity, there will be additional announcements, especially also connecting to the nature-based solutions track in the UN Climate Action Summit. So we are excited that these three conventions are also now coming more closer to each other. A special agenda for us is the sustainable cities as a topic of the 2019 Forum of Standing Committee on Finance under the UNFCCC, a standing committee, a standing body of negotiators focusing on cities this time. This has also been a process since 2018 or so. It has been a result of an intensive discussions and consultations. We're very happy that this summit will come just a couple of weeks before the UN Climate Action Summit. While the topics are familiar for most of the city community or urban community, let's remember these are the climate finance experts and national government representatives. So imagine that with the scientific community of IPCC, we have kicked off a research agenda, and with the finance community, where we are so much engaged in the NDC process, if we can open the doors more in the financing debate or the negotiators' outcomes, this would be complementing what's coming from Climate Action Summit. If you can refer from Marshall's presentations, there is already an ambitious mobilization with number of public and private entities, the networks like CCFLA, and considering that there will be a summit initiative on subnational finance mobilization through Lucia or the City Climate Gap Fund, we believe if all these can also feed into this Sustainable Cities Forum of the Standing Committee on Finance, the added value would be that the outcome of this forum will directly be fed into the negotiations of the COP25 at the end of the year. Therefore, it is official negotiation document. Therefore, anything that is written in this outcome document will be very important, very helpful. We have been acting, ICLEI and C40 have been acting as the focal points for the Standing Committee on Finance. We have already been receiving interest from partners from all around the world as speakers or panelists, and the agenda is being finalized soon. The dates are 12th and 13th of September, and we look forward to outcomes as well. And final slide, this is much more similar than what has been presented. The agenda at COP, I know there are a lot of questions coming up. We wanted to also have a discussion with the Chilean delegation during the Latin American Climate Week this week. So we're still on the understanding that in the first week there will be Ministers of Transport meeting on the 3rd of December. If this would be the case, we may consider to host an urban mobility event or summit or a dialogue with the Ministers of Transport. This may need a specific group of mayors or governors attending this, let's say, event. And during the rest of the week, towards the end of the first week, we will have Marrakesh Partnership thematic discussions. And we also know, recalling the other priorities of the Chilean presidency on circular economy, biodiversity, adaptation, we should be expecting that there will be additional mobilization in the second week as well, so that we can sit together with the ministers of environment or ministers of climate or ministers of finance. We are in touch with the Chilean leadership, as well as Santiago de Chile as the metropolitan region hosting this this event, the summit. There will be more updates coming soon, but this is the expectation so far. We know Chilean Association of Local Governments or other initiatives like Adapt Chile are also discussing to host a pavilion in the green zone. We hope this could be materialized so that the local partners could host or such a pavilion, so that then the global partners can come and engage more actively. But probably we'll hear more. You can also recall there's numerous side event applications. The official UNFC side event application is not open yet, therefore nothing is lost. So we are expecting this to be opened up by the end of August, which is next week, or the first week of September. And stay tuned for further updates from UNFCCC, especially accredited organizations, so that they can apply. We also know there's a special application for the Chilean networks, which is by the 25th of August. This concludes our presentation or webinars today in terms of the inputs. You just to remind that the previous webinars records and the presentations are all on the web with the mentioned links. It's accessible through the citizenregions.org, the traditional website for the climate negotiations. Recalling that we have captured our COP24 outcomes and our three-pronged strategy for the 2019. This can be downloaded also from the web. Recapping that the Paris Agreement has numerous references to local and regional governments. Therefore, the NDC implementation definitely has to be much more inclusive and ambitious in terms of raising the climate emissions so that the climate targets can be met. And finally, these are the specific outcomes from Talanoas and others from Katowice. We are aware there will be additional negotiations going on the market mechanisms or non-market approaches, and there will be more updates on that as well soon. With this, I'd like to thank you very much for your interest. I know it was a bit long, but we're very happy we have heard updates from the Climate Summit, especially with Marshall's inputs. And now the floor is open. We have a couple of more minutes to go. Anyone who wants to raise a point or ask questions or share any update, you're more than welcome, either to type in question box or raise your hands as in the chat box. I see no new ones. Marshall, if you're still there, is there anything you want to add? Maybe you may have listened and there may be additional remarks you may would like to complement. Feel free to take the floor again as a concluding remark if needed.
No, thank you for the other updates, and definitely I remain available for any additional questions following this webinar today. So thanks for including me. Perfect.
We appreciate. We are hoping Marshall will join us in the afternoon as well, but we will also be joining by Hamza Tiber and Sophie Aubert from the SG office, because that is suitable for their time frame from New York. And we will try to share any additional remarks and points as well. And we are receiving comments and appreciations from the participants of the webinar for both Marshall and me, and that's really appreciated, and we're happy that you're happy. And we will be sharing the links tomorrow so that you can continue to be updated, especially on the stay tuned for climate summit updates, which will be coordinated by the GCOM, but we will be happy to support as ICLEI as the focal point of the LGMA at the UNFCCC process. With this, without further delays, I think we have come to the end of our session. I thank you all for your interest and engagement, and wish you a nice day and night, and look forward to join in the next webinars in the upcoming months, which will happen every month in around the third week of September, as well in the next one. But because of the climate summit, it will be the week before the climate summit on the 18th of, let me check the exact date was, I think it was 17th or 18th of September. Just let me once again, 18th of September, yeah. On the 18th of September, we'll have our 9th webinar. Thank you, and have a nice day and have a nice evening.